Our story begins on a castle wall one evening. Bernardo comes to relieve Francisco of his watch. After some weather-related small talk, Horatio and Marcellus arrive and greet the departing Francisco. Marcellus has, quite literally, just seen a ghost, and he's very keen that the other gentlemen should see it too. Luckily for him, the ghost reappears. Horatio recognizes it as that of King Hamlet of Denmark, who recently passed away. As suddenly as the ghost reappeared, he also disappears. Horatio points out that the ghost was wearing the same armor that King Hamlet wore when he defeated the King Fortinbras. Fortinbras' son, also Fortinbras, has just vowed to have his vengeance on the Danes. After a brief reappearance, the ghost vanishes for good, and the men go to tell the ghost's son, for consistency's sake also named Hamlet, what they've seen. Trumpets sound in the court of Claudius, the new king of Denmark, and of his wife Gertrude. Claudius is the brother of the late King Hamlet, and Gertrude, the late King Hamlet's wife. Prince Hamlet is also there, as is Polonius, an aide to Claudius, and Polonius' son, Laertes, as are the ambassadors from Norway, Voltimund and Cornelius. Claudius explains how they chose not to have a long period of mourning for King Hamlet, as they needed to be vigilant, with Fortinbras threatening revenge. Laertes asks for permission to return to school in France, which is granted. Noting Hamlet's dark demeanor, the king and queen try to comfort him and encourage him to move on. Hamlet snaps back that he can only act as he feels, a dig at his mother, who seems to have moved on very quickly from her husband's passing. They remind him that he is still their heir and ask him not to return to school in Wittenberg, which he agrees to. Now alone, Hamlet makes his first soliloquy, telling us that he wants to end his life and to have it resolve itself into adieu. Unfortunately, as a Christian, Hamlet cannot commit suicide, and so he must watch his mother commit incest. Horatio, Bernardo, and Marcellus enter to tell Hamlet about their ghostly encounter. Hamlet, maybe feeling a little left out, tells them that he'll stay vigilant in case the ghost visits him too. Laertes is busy preparing to return to France, and very matter-of-factly speaking to his sister, Ophelia, about her romance with Prince Hamlet. Citing their different social rankings, he advises it to break off. Hamlet can only have one thing in mind with her. Polonius arrives and, after offering paternal wisdom to his son, hops on the bandwagon and offers Ophelia the same advice. She agrees to end it with Hamlet. Horatio, Marcellus, and Hamlet meet on the castle walls. Hamlet grumbles about Claudius, but before he can finish, the ghost joins them. Hamlet identifies his father's ghost, but can't say for certain if the ghost's intentions are good or bad, nor from whence he comes. The ghost will speak to Hamlet, and they go from the others. The ghost has just popped out from purgatory for a bit to ask Hamlet to avenge him. He explains that Claudius seduced Gertrude and murdered him by pouring poison into his ear. The ghost asks Hamlet to exact revenge only on Claudius and not from Gertrude, and this angers Hamlet. The ghost leaves, and Hamlet's friends return. He asks them to say nothing of this incident, but he tells Horatio that his plan is to feign insanity so as to more easily spy on Claudius and Gertrude. Polonius calls a servant, Reynaldo, and instructs him to go to Paris and to dig up whatever dirt he can find on Laertes, even if that means using underhand means to discredit his son. Ophelia comes in and reports that Hamlet came to her in an extremely disheveled state. Polonius concludes that it must be because Ophelia obeyed his wish that she end the relationship with Hamlet, sending him into madness. He resolves to report this to Claudius. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two old school friends of Hamlet, arrive at court and are welcomed by the king and queen. They have been brought here to keep an eye on Hamlet and or to bring him some cheer, depending on which one you speak to. As they leave, Polonius speaks with the king and queen, and will soon fill them in on his theory as to Hamlet's supposed madness. The queen scoffs at this to her husband, insisting that Hamlet's grief is at the loss of his father and at their remarriage, and that is what is bothering him. The Norwegian ambassadors are brought in by Polonius. They have good news. Young Fortinbras has been convinced to drop the suit of revenge against the Danes in exchange for help with his war on the Poles. He just needs them to agree to allow him to pass through Danish territory. Despite a promise to be brief, Polonius begins with a monologue on the meanings of life and duty. He continues after Queen Gertrude admonishes him for it. He shows them a letter in Hamlet's hand, tells them that he forbade Ophelia from seeing the prince, and that must be what has driven him mad. Polonius even suggests that he and the king hide when Hamlet and Ophelia meet, so that he can hear it for himself. Hamlet enters, and Polonius asks the king and queen to excuse themselves, so that he can speak to Hamlet alone. In their discussion, Hamlet ridicules Polonius, though the latter doesn't grasp that. He becomes more convinced that Hamlet is lovesick, and exits the scene. Hamlet's old friends enter, and he presses them on why they're here. They try to fob the question off, but he eventually breaks them, and they admit to the king and queen's plans. This provokes Hamlet to lament everything again. The friends have good news, though. There is a distraction for Hamlet in the form of a troupe of actors. Polonius announces them, and the actors enter. Hamlet asks one of them to do a little bit from Virgil's Aeneid. The actor does it so well that he moves himself to tears. When he has them alone, he tells the actors that he wants them to do a play called The Murder of Gonzago, but he wants to insert a few original lines. They agree to this and depart. We now find out that Hamlet is going to insert a scene which reenacts how the ghost described King Hamlet's death. He wants to do this to test Claudius' reaction, and in so doing to test whether the ghost's accusations have grounds. Claudius, Gertrude, Polonius, Ophelia, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern are all discussing Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have no information to pass on, saying that they only know that Hamlet is excited for the upcoming play. They leave, as does Gertrude, as Polonius and Claudius wish to spy on Hamlet and Ophelia talking. Hamlet enters, and they hide, as Hamlet speaks to himself and weighs the matter of ending his life in his famous to be or not to be soliloquy. As he finishes, he sees Ophelia reading, assumes her to be praying. He asks for her prayers. She tells him that she wishes to return the gifts he gave her. He denies having given her anything, but she clarifies, telling him that she meant his words of love. He continues his denial, saying that he never loved her, and that, considering how untrustworthy men are, she would be better in a nunnery. He asks where her father is, and is enraged when she lies. He curses her, and tells her that he feels women are two-faced and deserve to be set aside. She should really consider that nunnery. A shocked Ophelia is left alone. Claudius and Polonius come out of hiding. Claudius is now convinced that Hamlet's madness is not caused by lovesickness, for he doesn't seem to have loved Ophelia, though Polonius still thinks it is. They will get Hamlet to go to Gertrude, and Polonius will eavesdrop. Hopefully he will confide in his mother. Claudius is going to make plans for Hamlet to be sent away to England. The court assembles to watch the play. Hamlet, after coaching the cast a little bit, tells Horatio what his plan is. Hamlet, Polonius, and Claudius engage in light conversation. Gertrude invites her son to sit with her, but he chooses to lie at Ophelia's feet. Ophelia takes this new mood to be merriness. In the play, the Queen character announces that she will never marry should the King character die. Gertrude comments that the lady doth protest too much. When the play gets to the part where the pretender poisons the king, Claudius becomes agitated. Hamlet tells them that the pretender will now woo the queen and attempt to take the crown. This is all too much for Claudius, who calls for lights and leaves. Hamlet and Horatio agree that the ghost was right. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern return to tell Hamlet that everyone is very upset with him, and that he needs to go and see Gertrude. When Hamlet is alone, he observes that the time has come. Firstly, he must rebuke his mother, and then he needs to kill Claudius. Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to escort Hamlet to England as soon as possible, convincing them that it is in the national interest that Hamlet be gone. They agree on all counts. Polonius informs Claudius that he is going to eavesdrop on Hamlet and Gertrude, and that he will report back now. Claudius tries to pray for forgiveness, but he cannot, mostly because he refuses to give up his ill-gotten gains. Instead, he sort of prays for the ability to pray. Hamlet stumbles upon Claudius and senses a chance to kill him. However, he is worried that Claudius might be praying for forgiveness. If so, Claudius will surely go to heaven, and Hamlet doesn't want that. He wants Claudius to be sent to hell. He leaves the king and goes to his mother. Polonius arrives in Gertrude's chamber ahead of Hamlet and hides. The prince arrives, and his mother tells him that he has offended his father, i.e. Claudius, his stepfather. Hamlet tells her that she has offended his father, i.e. King Hamlet, her late husband. Hamlet becomes threatening, causing Gertrude to call for help, a call repeated by the hidden Polonius. Hamlet, in a state himself, stabs Polonius, who he thought was Claudius. Hamlet continues to argue with Gertrude, comparing the noble and saintly Hamlet Sr. with the vile, infectious Claudius. King Hamlet's ghost reappears, though Gertrude cannot see it. Initially, Hamlet believes that the ghost wants to tell him off for not having finished the business, but then realizes that the ghost might have come to protect Gertrude, who is now convinced that Hamlet has completely lost the plot. Hamlet begs his mother to confess her sin, or at the very least, to not sleep with Claudius anymore. He tells his mother that he knows he is to be sent to England, and that he doesn't trust his old school friends. He departs, and in a moment of motherly, "You clean that up," he has to drag Polonius's body away himself. Claudius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern enter Gertrude's chamber looking for Hamlet. She asks to be left alone with her husband, and tells him what happened to Polonius, and that she is afraid Hamlet has lost all reason. Showing some concern for Hamlet, he still deplores the death of Polonius, and realizes it could have been him standing behind that corner. Any fear of this scandal getting out is allayed by Gertrude, who says that Hamlet is disposing of the body himself. They agree that he must depart for England immediately, and call the friends back in to ask them to find Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern catch up with Hamlet, who shows contempt for them and will not speak to them. Claudius tells his courtiers that he cannot publicly punish Hamlet for his part in Polonius' death, because Hamlet remains very popular with the people, and the king risks a riot by punishing him. Hamlet enters and will not reveal where he has left Polonius' body, rather engaging in another game of riddles, which eventually ends with Hamlet conceding where he has hidden Polonius. As attendants go to get the body, Claudius tells Hamlet that his boat to England is waiting, and Hamlet leaves. Claudius, owed a favour from the King of England, prays that the English will kill Hamlet quickly when the prince arrives there. On his way, Hamlet sees Fortinbras' army heading to war. He compares these soldiers who go to fight over worthless lands to the mission that he has had set for him, but yet he is inactive. In a turn of events, Ophelia has gone mad. Horatio convinces Gertrude to see the girl, but Ophelia is unintelligible, singing fragments of songs. Of further concern is that Laertes has returned and is spoiling for revenge over his father's death. The whole situation has become very tense. When Laertes confronts the king, he rails angrily, though this does not affect Claudius. When the singing Ophelia returns, Laertes feels sorrow at her state. The girl hands out flowers and skips away, while Claudius promises Laertes satisfaction. Horatio receives letters from Hamlet. One is for the king, and one for himself. Hamlet tells his friends that their ship was attacked by pirates, who treated Hamlet well, and have returned him to Denmark alone. He also tells Horatio that when they see each other, Hamlet has news for him. Claudius confirms to Laertes that Hamlet killed Polonius. Laertes can't fathom why Hamlet was not punished, but news of Hamlet's return gives them an opportunity. Claudius will arrange a fencing match between Hamlet and Laertes, but the latter will have an unblunted sword, so he may kill Hamlet and get his vengeance, and it will seem like it was all an accident. Laertes reveals that he will put poison on the blade, just to make sure. News of Ophelia's death now reaches the group. She was weaving garlands when a branch she was sitting on broke, sending her to her death in the river. An enraged Laertes storms out. Two gravediggers are preparing a grave. They are discussing the rights and wrongs of the deceased. It seems that the person, a woman, drowned herself, and so will not receive all appropriate rituals. Hamlet and Horatio happen upon them, and a light-hearted conversation ensues. Hamlet does not realize yet whose grave this is. He finds a skull and asks who it might have been. The gravediggers tell him that this was Yorick, the court jester to old King Hamlet. Young Hamlet has memories of the deceased jester. But then Ophelia's funeral procession arrives. Hamlet and Horatio hide. Laertes is arguing with the priest, insisting on a full Christian burial, but is refused. Gertrude laments the death of the girl, saying she had hoped that Ophelia would marry her son. Hamlet now realizes that it is Ophelia being buried. He attacks Laertes, and the two brawl, even falling into the grave. The two are separated, and the congregation leave. Claudius promises Laertes his satisfaction immediately, and implies that a further death will come soon. Hamlet fills Horatio in on Claudius's plans, that Hamlet found the letter to the King of England asking that Hamlet be killed. Horatio struggles to believe it until he sees the letter for himself. Hamlet stole the letter and replaced it with one requesting that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern be killed instead, and is amused that they will hand their own death warrant to the King of England. Horatio is likewise convinced of Claudius' evil, and agrees that he needs to go. A courtier enters to invite Hamlet to duel Laertes at the king's invitation. Hamlet declines the offer of time to prepare. He will come now. The scene is set for the duel. Hamlet and Laertes grasp hands. Hamlet apologizes for the scene at Ophelia's grave, and pleads insanity with regards to the death of Polonius. While not warming to Hamlet, Laertes will bear no grudge. The duel begins, and Hamlet makes a hit. Claudius toasts Hamlet, then drops a pearl into his wine as a prize. When Hamlet makes a second hit, the queen wipes her son's brow and offers him a drink, which Hamlet declines. Despite the king asking her not to, Gertrude drinks some of the wine. In the third bout, Hamlet is hit with the poisoned sword. They both drop their swords and accidentally switch swords in the scuffle. Hamlet now hits Laertes with the poisoned blade. The queen swoons, crying that she's been poisoned. Laertes blurts out the plan to Hamlet, and tells Hamlet that the blade is laced with poison. Hamlet runs the sword through Claudius, and pours the poisoned wine down the king's throat. Hamlet goes to Laertes, who is nearly dead. They forgive each other, and Laertes dies. Horatio, who is not at all dead, rushes to the dying Hamlet. A herald announces the arrival of Fortinbras. Hamlet asks that Horatio tells his story, and that the crown of Denmark must now fall to Fortinbras. Hamlet utters, "And the rest is silence," and dies. Horatio turns to Fortinbras and two English ambassadors, who inform them of the death of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Fortinbras is shocked at the sight of the entire royal family dead around him. He accepts the crown, and orders a full military funeral for Hamlet.